What's up guys, it's Josh from KeepItTechie, and today I wanted to do a quick video showing you guys how to switch from Windows to Linux. So as I stated in the intro of the video, I wanted to show you guys how to switch from Windows to Linux. And this is the perfect time to do it. I know a lot of people are gonna probably get new devices or new laptops, new computers, and all that stuff for the Christmas holidays. And I just wanted to show people how to switch to Linux from Windows. But anyway, last year, Microsoft ended the support for Windows 7. So a lot of people with older Windows operating systems like Windows 7, anything with Windows 7 or older is outdated. And so if you're using Windows 7, you're kind of wrong at this point. And your system may not be able to accept Windows 10. So this will also be another alternative video for you guys as well. If you have Windows 7 and you want to get off of a non-supported OS, then switching to Linux will fix that problem for you guys. But if you are getting a new device, this will be a perfect tutorial to walk you through the process of actually switching to Linux. Now, one thing I won't be able to go into is the BIOS settings. A lot of people devices or a lot of manufacturers, they create their own software that handles the BIOS, and it's kind of hard for me to show for all the different software that's ran on different devices as far as the BIOS goes. So one thing you want to make sure you go into the BIOS is enable your USB device to be bootable, or actually not enable it, but just move it up in the boot order. That way, when you boot up the system, it will look at that USB device first. Now, one of the first things you want to do when reinstalling a new operating system on your device, whether it's old or new, is have a good backup of the system in case something goes terribly wrong. It's very important if you're switching from like Windows 7 and you have a system with a whole bunch of data on it that you want to back up. Well, you want to back up your data, and most likely you won't be going back to Windows 7 once you make this switch. So it doesn't make sense to back up the operating system, but if you want to, that's a good idea to do, is back up the operating system. That way you can revert back to what you had before you attempted this process. Now, if you're working with a new device, look at it this way. You purchase that laptop. Within the price of that laptop, you're also paying for the operating system. And so it's a good not free, but it's a good operating system that you actually pay for. So you want to back up that system, and most likely you don't have any files. So this is a good time to actually back up the system fully. So you can do that by either using various backup software where you can back up the actual partition of the drive. Now, one of the applications I use is DD. And that's a command line utility that's in Linux, so you can actually boot up a live ISO, plug in a external USB drive, and then use the DD command to actually back up that whole partition. That way you'll have a full backup of the system, and if something comes on, you can actually back it up to an image file. And if something goes wrong, then you can take that image file and write it back to that hard drive, and then you'll have your system back to where it was before. And if you have any questions on how to use the DD command, I actually did a video on the DD command, so I won't go through how to actually do it. I detailed this out in that actual video. So let's move on to the next step. Once you make sure you have your backups, the next thing you want to do is actually find out what distribution you want to use. And unlike Windows, Mac OS, with Linux, you have a whole bunch of options of distributions that you could possibly use and install on your system. And I have a website that I want to recommend and show you right fast that will actually allow you to pick the distribution that you want to install. But for this demonstration, I'll be using a basic Ubuntu install. It'll be Ubuntu, which is actually XFCE desktop environment. I'll use that for this demonstration when I'm going through the process. But let's go to that website right fast so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Now, I've actually been using this website for a while, showing you guys it in multiple videos, but I'll just quickly show it to you guys right fast. So it should be up now. So DistroWatch. DistroWatch is a great place to do research on different Linux distributions that are out there. And as you can see, it's kind of an older website. I remember looking at this website, you know, a long time ago, and it pretty much looks the same. They haven't really updated it as much. But if you go to the right hand side of the website, you'll see that they have a list of the most popular Linux distributions that are out there. And if we scroll down to the bottom, it's the top 100 Linux distros. And basically, just to explain it, they basically go off of page hits. So depending on how active their website page is, they'll rank it on the actual rankings over here. So as you can see, MX Linux is number 1, Manjaro is number 2, Mint, Pop! OS, Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is in the top 5. And so I'll use that. It's a Debian based distribution, so this is one of the simpler distributions to actually use, either Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Elementary OS or Pop! OS. They're pretty much Debian based distributions. Some of these are Arch based, like Manjaro. But like I stated, I'm gonna go on and just show you guys a Ubuntu distribution install and how you would actually go about doing it. So let's say you want to go to Ubuntu and download Ubuntu. So I'll go to that site. It'll give you some information on it, just a little bit of information on the actual operating system. It says Ubuntu is a complete desktop Linux environment, freely available from both communities, with both communities and professional support. And one thing you want to always look at is the community that's behind the actual distribution. When there's a really big community behind a distribution, that means there's a lot of people that can help you. So you can join the forum boards and all that stuff, and that'll give you a sense of actually knowing that someone can help you if you run into any issues. So just kind of for your first experience when switching to Linux, you want to make sure you pick a very popular distribution that has a good community behind it. And Ubuntu has a good community, and it's been around for a long time, so it's a lot of support. And if you run into issues, you can always, join their forum board, and most likely whatever problem you run into, somebody else is most likely ran into that problem, so you'll get some information on how to actually fix it. Now, once you figure out what distribution you want to use, you obviously want to go to their website and download the ISO. So I just went to Ubuntu's website, and you can accept whatever. That's basically their tracking stuff. So and as you can see, this link is to actually the Ubuntu 16.04. What you want to do is go to the home page. Like I said, they update the site a lot, but sometimes you may find links that are behind. But the latest version of Ubuntu is Ubuntu 20.04. So you want to make sure you download that version. And then you can actually click the download button up here, and this will allow you to download the Ubuntu desktop version. So you just click that, and I would recommend you download the LTS. And just so you know, the LTS stands for long-term support. So when Ubuntu is released, they release a new version every couple years, but the older versions are still supported for a time period after. But you want to go on and stick with the LTSs, in my opinion, since it's your first time installing it. If this is your first time installing it, look for a long-term support. Now, you can download the latest version. Like I said, you may run into bugs and all that stuff, and it's not fully 100% supported, but the long-term support version is the one you want to get, because they have tested it with different hardware, and it's an overall stable version of Ubuntu. So, and then also, I forgot to show you guys that, and I canceled the download because I already have it downloaded But they also have other flavors that I want to show you guys. So if you scroll down here on that download page, you know, that same download page, there is Ubuntu, which is the KDE version. And this is basically called Ubuntu flavors. So they have different flavors, and the flavors are really associated with the desktop environment that you'll be working in. So you can check these out. They all are supported the same way as the 20.04 LTS. They have the 20.04 LTS version under all these flavors. So you can select whichever one of the desktops. You can look at some of my videos. I've done videos on these different desktop environments, mostly XFCE, but I do have some videos where I show you guys Lubuntu or Ubuntu Budgie and Kubuntu. I think I have a video on Kubuntu, which is the KDE desktop environment. And then Budgie, this has the Budgie desktop. They have a Mate version that you can download and install. And they also have Ubuntu, which is one of my favorite ones, which I'll show you guys later once I have it up and running. But I'll click on one of these so you guys can see. That's the main Ubuntu one we clicked on. This is the Ubuntu one. So you can go here and download the latest LTS version. You can just click download and see, you'll see right here, latest LTS release 20.0.4 Focal Fossa, and you can download that version of Ubuntu or flavor of Ubuntu. And then also just click on one of the other ones. This is the KDE flavor, and as you can see, they all have their community built around these different flavors. So if you install one of these versions or flavors of Ubuntu, then you want to join one of the community areas under that version. And that way, if you run into any issues with that desktop environment running on top of Ubuntu, you'll have a more focused support group that can help you in case you run into any issues. Now, I'm going to assume that you downloaded the ISO on your Windows operating system. So you need a way to actually create a bootable USB drive, right? So one thing you can do is actually use an application that I used to use a long time ago when I was on Windows, when I used to write ISOs. The one I recommend is actually Rufus. Now, there are multiple other ISO writers that are out there, but you can download Rufus. This is one of the easiest ones to actually install the ISO from. So you can use this actual application by downloading it on Windows, and then this will allow you to format your flash drive and write the ISO to the actual USB and make it a live USB. Now, one thing, you want to make sure you have a big enough flash drive as well. Most people, a cheap flash drive, you know, only costs a couple bucks. You can get a 32 gigabyte flash drive for like 16 bucks from Walmart or something. So just pick one of those up, or off Amazon, you know what I'm saying? You can get one for like 15 bucks or so, a pretty good one. So I recommend you know, get a big enough flash drive to handle the ISO, and then use an application like this to actually write the ISO to the USB. And this is a free application. You can download the latest version. Just click down here to the latest version, download it, install it, and then you can write your ISO. And it has very clear instructions on how to do this. And it's really not that hard to actually do it. You can create a USB drive that is bootable using that ISO. Now, the next step at this point, I'm not gonna walk you through it, installing Linux on your system, because I've done plenty of videos on actually going through the installation process of installing Linux on a machine. Now, the process may be slightly different depending on your hardware and the BIOS and all that stuff. So you may have a little trouble getting the ISO or the USB recognized to where you can boot into it, but refer to the manufacturer's instructions on how to actually boot another device from the hard drive. There's been cases where I've actually had to remove the hard drive in order to get the live USB to boot up. and then plug it back in. That shouldn't be the case nowadays. A lot of systems, you can go into the BIOS and make changes that'll stick and force the system to boot up from that USB drive. And that's one of the reasons I don't want to show that, because if I show you that on my system, it may be totally different from your system, and I don't want to confuse you by showing you what I have to do for my system versus what you're doing on your system. So basically what you want to do is stick that USB drive into your system, and you should be able to set the boot order to where it boots to that USB drive, and it'll boot up the ISO from the USB, and it'll bring up the actual installer for the distribution that you're installing on your computer. And once you get to that step, all you have to do is follow the instructions. And like I said, I've done plenty of videos on installing a system, and I walk you step by step through the process of actually installing Linux onto the system by selecting your drives. You want to make sure you select the right hard drive. You want to go down and create your accounts, and it'll go through and install everything for you. And one thing about Linux, it has been getting easier and easier to install the operating system onto your system. It's a lot of next, you know what I'm saying, and putting in a few information, selecting your keyboard layout, you know, and some of those things I stated. There are options for you to set up encryption on your hard drive if you want to, as well as using logical volumes. All those processors are built into the installer, so all you have to do is make your selections and it'll build the system for you. And like I stated, I have a bunch of videos where I walk through this whole process, so just refer to those if you want to, or anybody else's videos that are showing you how to install whatever distribution you're trying to install in your system. Most of them are very detailed. Okay, so after you finish the install, the last thing it'll require you to do is reboot the system. So you reboot that system, and then it'll actually stop after it shuts down the system before it starts the reboot process. And you want to just go down and remove that live USB from the system. That way, when it fully reboots, it'll boot back into the BIOS, and the BIOS recognize that it has a installation created on the hard drive on your system, and boot into Grub, and that'll activate the bootloader, and then you'll boot into the actual distribution. And one of the first things you want to do is to update the system. And let me go down and pull up my virtual machine, and this is Ubuntu after an install. Now actually this is an install I've done previously, but this is Ubuntu. This is what you'll be greeted with. Well, you'll actually be greeted with the desktop manager, which is where you'll log in. So you just type in your username and password, or select your username and then type in your password and log into the system. And one of the first things you want to do is actually update the system. So you want to make sure you update the system by simply running the update manager, or it should, depending on what distribution you download and install, it may have something that automatically checks for updates, and it'll pop up and say, hey, you have like 20 updates that need to be done, or security updates that need to be done. But if you're using like Ubuntu and you want to do it from the command line, you want to learn how to do it from the command line, then you can type in sudo apt updates, and that'll show you how many updates you have for the system. Now this system I haven't touched in a long time, so it may have like a whole bunch of updates, which I won't go through those updates, but this is the process that you want to do when you first boot up the system, because a lot of times it may be a little behind. And what I mean by that is the ISO you downloaded, it may not include the most recent updates for your system. So you always want to do that first anyway, even before you start installing applications. But you want to do that first, and then you can start going through and customizing your system and installing actual applications. And which leads me into my next step in the process of installing Linux or switching to Linux. You want to go through and look through the catalog of software and see what can be used in the place of applications that you got accustomed to in Windows. And this is, in my opinion, the hardest part for people to get past when installing Linux, is by understanding the software. The software is totally different from Windows. A lot of the software does the same stuff, but it may work slightly different, and it's harder for people to get over that little hump. Like, for instance, you won't have Microsoft Word, but you will have LibreOffice, which is pretty much the same thing. You can even save documents within the docx format, and you can also open up older documents from previous versions of Microsoft Office. And then also, like, let's say you have Photoshop, then you have GIMP on Linux, which is, you know, a alternative to Photoshop. You can do a lot of the same photo editing within the GIMP application. So you want to go through and start doing research on actual applications that you may want to use. And one other resource I can give you guys is actually, let's go back to my web browser, and there's a website you can actually go to. It's called alternative2.to. So alternative.to. And this is actually not the right site. So let's just search in Google right fast. Alternative 2. All right, cool. And yeah, it's alternative2.net, and I apologize for that, but alternative2.net is where you want to go. Now, let's say you need an application that, you know, works with Photoshop, or for Photoshop, just to, you know, use that as an example. You can click on that, and then it'll show you alternative applications for it. And as you can see, the top one is GIMP. And GIMP can be used on Windows or Mac OS. I mean, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So you can install this on all the 3 different platforms. But Linux, this is the best alternative for Photoshop for Linux. And I've done videos on the GIMP application, so check out those videos as well. But this is a good resource to find out applications that you can install. And so I hope this video helps someone out. I mainly made this video just to introduce new people to the Linux distribution. I recently got a bunch of subscribers that are from where I did an interview on another channel, and a lot of those people are kind of new to Linux, or they may have some information on Linux, or they know a little bit about Linux, but they may be still new to it and they want to see how to actually switch to Linux. So I made this video for, you know, a lot of my new subscribers that may have came over from that interview, and they may be interested in Linux, in switching to Linux. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys got something out of it. If you have any questions, please leave comments down in the comment boxes below. And I also have a whole bunch of videos on my YouTube channel that walks through different things or different applications, different distributions that you may want to check out that will help you transition to Linux. So like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and of course, keep it techie.